Have you said yes? Have you said yes to the path, the way, the practice? If you feel like you have said yes, give a little movement. So when you said yes, did you say it once or have you had to say it over and over again? Is it kind of a repeat mantra? Oh, this? Okay, yes. Wait, that? Yes. They call the master teacher, Jesus, the way shower, because there was a practice, a way, there was an opening, something to try on, a new idea. A new idea that was pretty radical and pretty controversial at the time. In Unity, a lot of times we talk about spiritual principles and we talk about laws, and I remember at my first Unity service and my first experience in Unity, I was in college, and I had grown up Catholic, and I was in college at the University of Colorado, and I started church hopping because I thought there's something that I need to support me right now. I was going through one of those dark night of the soul experiences, and I thought the essence of a spiritual community is what I'm looking for. But I wasn't finding it in my old tradition, so I thought I'd just hop around. And so I started doing that Sunday to Sunday, and I found myself at Unity of Boulder. And one of the things that Reverend Jack Groverling kept saying was principle and law, this law, and when you understand this spiritual law, when you understand the spiritual principle. And I remember hearing that over and over and hearing different pieces that woke me up. But I remember going like, I want all of these laws. I need all of these principles and all of these laws. And like he would talk around them, but I'd be like, what was that one? What is the law there? What is the practice? But that was the beginning of a particular type of yes for me. The integrated yes, where you begin to fully expand your experience of life and believe in far more than the human condition, and begin to live into the mysticism of the spiritual condition. And so I thought today I would talk a little bit about the practice. Do you think you would get the same answer from every Unity minister if you said, what is the practice in Unity? Do you think that you would get the same answer from every Unity practitioner, for everyone that explores, learns about, attends, practices the Unity way? Do you think you'd get the same answer at what the practice is? Do you see any problems with that? If you don't, you're in the right place. Do you think that there are any of us that eat exactly the same diet, that go to sleep at the same time, that live the same lives? Any problem with that? No. So part of the practice is really being open to our own uniqueness and our own relationship or experience in and of and as source creating, source expressing God consciousness. And though it looks different for everyone, we can learn things by asking each other about our practice and about what we do and where we came from and what we've explored and what we believe or what we think we believe right now. For me, the very first experience of the practice has to do with awakening. And I think that's the same step for most of us. We have a moment of awakening where from that moment on, we don't find ourselves drifting back. We may have moments where we're not as aware, but we're pretty much awake. And that stage is marked by excitement. That stage is marked, if you've had that experience where you say, I never knew there was a center that even taught those things or practiced those things, and there were groups of people that believe the way I believe. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I found it. I can't believe I didn't know it was here before. I didn't know there was a spiritual community that this is what they taught. Oh my gosh. So that first stage of awakening is really about becoming aware, becoming alert, listening deeply, and to some degree, being in awe. Raise your hand if you've had this experience. Yeah. Charles Fillmore talked about mind stretchers. And I think we have this experience of awakening when we meet some mind stretchers. In Sig Paulson's book, Your Power to Be, he says, some of these mind stretchers are that heaven is not a physical paradise. It is the kingdom of God, spirit, creative energy within me. He says, my leader in my search for the kingdom is the spirit of truth within. It is leading me into all the truth. My church is the temple of the living God that I am and that you are. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity Movement, pointed out that there is a church or worship service going on in each individual all of the time. But most are too occupied with outer things to know it. Our first stage of awakening lets us know that that church is happening within us, and we become very interested in it. If you haven't had that experience yet, this is the invitation. For me, part of that awakening was being at Unity of Boulder every Sunday and hearing messages and realizing I was doing something to impact my reality that I had no idea I was doing. And that I actually had the power to get in there and change it. That when I didn't like the results, or I didn't like the experience I was having in my life, or I didn't like the story I was experiencing, I could recognize that I have a pen in my hand and I'm writing that story. Or if you imagine it as a vehicle, a lot of times we're sitting in the passenger seat or even the back seat, and some of us in the trunk, trying to kick out the lights and go, wait, I'm in there, to get the people behind us to stop the car. But that we all have the option to get into the driver's seat. I remember a time when my little brother was going through some things, and he had some stories about what was going on in his life, and they were valid stories. He was in college, and they were valid stories of victimhood, you know. You could see that perspective. It was nothing to be argued with. And I remember thinking, how could I help him? Like, how could I give him something? Because this consciousness that he's experiencing right now isn't serving him. And if it grows, he's going to be subject to it for quite some time. And I remember explaining to him, like driving a car, you know, you can do that. You can be a victim of the circumstance. You can blame this on someone else. It can be their fault. All of that is very valid. You can be hurt. All of that is very valid. They could be wrong. Fine. It's a perspective to have. It's a perception. But is it useful? And I just kept going back to that with him. Is it useful? Is this state of mind, is this perception, this consciousness useful? Technically, it's all useful. It's like, what is it useful for? Some of it is useful to keep us in bondage. And some of it is useful for our emancipation. And when we get from the passenger's seat into the driver's seat, it's for our emancipation. Because we recognize that no matter what our emotions, no matter what our thoughts, no matter what our experiences, we're driving the vehicle of our lives. It's never useful to be a victim. It's never useful to blame outside of ourselves. It's fine, and it's ordinary. But if we want to live a life that is extraordinary, we can ask ourselves the question in a moment of awakening, is this thought, idea, perception, perspective useful for me? The next stage for me was the stage where you dive into the laws. the spiritual laws, where you start recognizing that we learned a lot about physical laws. We learn a lot about science, and we have even started to learn a lot about psychology. And we go through school and we talk to each other about a lot of these ideas and a lot of these facts or truths. We do a lot of learning. But when you start diving into spiritual learning and you start understanding that there are other laws, just like there is the law of gravity, but there are spiritual laws like the law of circulation, like the law of infinite expansion, like the law of mind action. When you start trying on those laws, not believing them because someone gave them to you and told you this is how it happens, this is how it works, this is how it operates, so do this, stop thinking for yourself and go ahead and do this. But when someone invites you into it and says, try this on as a practice and see what changes in your life. When you're in this stage, you're in a stage of experimentation. You're in a stage where you realize that we live in an interactive universe, that we can influence our reality and influence our experience, and that in fact we are co-creators. And we begin this stage of testing it. And it's a pretty exciting stage where we test it. This is the stage where a lot of times you hear people talk about manifesting parking spots. For some, that stays pretty cool, like for the rest of your days. But it's really a stage of demonstrating. It's a stage of recognizing, practicing, and trying on. I can demonstrate these things. I remember for me in this stage, I would be in awe of how I would kind of just try something on, and the funniest things would happen. There was one time I was visiting my mom in New York City, and I was in ministerial school, and I just didn't, it's not that I didn't have money, because those aren't words that I would use at this stage. I would not say I don't have money. I would say I don't choose to spend my money in this way, or I choose to grow my money or steward my money, whatever it was. But technically, I didn't have any money. And there were things that I wanted or I needed. I remember my blow dryer blew out and a few other things, and I forget what the other things were. But literally, I was using patience and just going, this would be nice. And I remember walking through New York City after knowing I needed a blow dryer and whatever it was, and someone was clearing out their apartment, with everything on the side of the road, the trash. They were clearing everything out. And right there on top was like a whole set of things that I had said I needed. And on the top was a purple blow dryer, my favorite color. And I did question it a little bit, like it's probably not going to work. It worked. I think I had it for like 7 years after that, something ridiculous. And then when I graduated from ministerial school, I had this vision of going on the road in an RV. And Robin knows this story. Robin Goff from the Light Center. Because fast forward to a few years, I ended up not going on the road with an RV. I ended up trading in my Volkswagen Golf for my dad's mom van. And I drove around the country in a mom van, faking it like it was an RV. But about halfway through my travels, I was serving at a ministry that asked me to come back. I had driven all the way across Texas to Florida, had just arrived in Florida, and the ministerial class asked me to come back to do hurricane relief work, and if I would do music for them at their experience where they were going down to serve the people in Louisiana. And I said I would. And so at the end of that trip, I was talking to the minister who had just come back, and she was asking me about what she could do for my class. And I said, well, actually, it's not my class. I'm here. I graduated, but I'm here with this class supporting them. And so we talked about what they could do, and I think it was a pizza party or something like that. And somehow I'd been sharing with her my story, and the next morning she came to me and she said, I want to do something for you too. I was thinking about this, and I know you won't be able to enjoy the pizza party. And she said, but we have all of these RVs that have been gifted to us, And I have one that I would like you to have that I was using, and because I have a better one now, and so you can have this one. And Robin knows because we got to share it. It got hosted at the Light Center for a while because driving around in a big RV as a woman, which you find later on in some of the later stages of spiritual practice, that sometimes you think you want something. And then when you get it, you're like, well, I want that if it comes with a man who's a mechanic that really wants to be on the road with me. I remember driving it from the village, who let me host it here for a little bit, out to Robin's center, and it was one of my first big drives in it, and it stopped running on the side of the road, and I was like, oh, no. And I called my friend, we called him Tennessee Bob. He was a minister from Tennessee. And I was like, Bob, I'm driving the RV. Something's not working. The whole thing was not working. And he goes through a few things. And then he says, check the gas. And I was like, that's it. Yep. That's it. So that RV was a great blessing, but not one that I took on the road in the way that I thought that I would. But that's the stage of engaging in the law. It's a stage of experimentation and the beauty of recognizing that we live in an interactive universe. It is not just happening to us. It is happening in us and through us and as us. Therefore, we are never a victim of a moment. Therefore, we do not have to wait for circumstances to be primed and pumped properly on the external in order to have internal conditions ripe for growth. We can live from the inside out, and that's a very exciting time. Now, one of the downfalls at that stage can be getting stuck, because each stage, right, has its spirit of growth, and then each stage has its place where you can kind of atrophy or get stuck or get distracted. And in that stage, people can get distracted by materialism. People can get distracted thinking, I'm here to use these laws and to use these principles just to get. Give me more. Which again, is there anything wrong with that? No judgment. But if one stops there, one has truly missed out, no? Because we are an inlet and an outlet of all that is God. And if the mantra isn't give, then we're missing something. Because we don't need to concern ourselves about what we're getting. We simply need to lift up, hold up, and have a yes, have a willingness. Another little bit of quicksand we can get in that stage is thinking, because we have demonstrated something, that we've got it all down, that we know the way, and that my way is the highway. My way is for everyone. This is what happened when I changed that word to this word, and then everything got better. This is what happened when I had what you have, and I healed it. This is what happened from my level of understanding, and now I'm going to write the Bible and give it to everyone around me to operate just as it is for me. If I say the word God, do you think you all have the same idea that comes to mind? Even if you tell someone, I am unity, do you think you're telling someone the exact same thing that the person sitting next to you is telling them? If they say, I'm unity? We are all so unique in our practice, and we're all so unique in our understanding. We can share our experiences and our learnings and our truth. But if we get stuck in thinking that we fully understand how everything operates and other people should do what we did, we are missing the mark. We can share our truth, no, we can share it. But it's always good to say, don't do this because I said so. Try it on and trust your heart. Take what you get from this. A lot of times in this stage, we get stuck in our words. And it's good to get stuck in our words because it's a level of awareness. And there is a point where we need to be vigilant about our words. But have you ever seen anyone that's scared of their words? Like, oh, I said that. Now this is going to happen. Because the law of mind action is operating. Like it's Friday the 13th. The word in Scripture is the creative force. Charles and Myrtle taught the word not as just something I'm saying. Yes, something that I'm saying in the vibration in the field of what I'm saying, the word makes a difference. But there is something more to that practice. When they say use your words, use your affirmation and denials. And it is this. It is that when we're pressing out a word and we're using the co-creative power of the word, there is an emotional field that goes with that. There's a feeling nature to the word. And as you know, one word that you say creates a different feeling in you than someone else using that word, no? So it's a combination of the word plus the feeling nature that co-creates. And then you have something else coming into play, which is a doozy. And sometimes we don't awaken to this until later stages. And when I say stages, it's really an illusion because it's all kind of a spiral and you tap back and weave back in and out of different stages your whole practice, do you not? But there's the word, and there's the feeling nature, and then there's also your underlying beliefs, which can be conscious and they can be totally subconscious. And so all of those come into play when we engage in the law of mind action. I can say all day that I am a beloved of the spirit of life and love. But if there is an underlying belief that needs to be healed, if there is a part of me inside going, no, sir, you came out of grace a long time ago when that happened, then I can say it all I want until I start engaging in other elements of the practice. So it's ours not to get stuck in any of these loops, in any of this quicksand, but to stay fluid and to allow ourselves the movement. The next stage is the stage of exploration, and that is that stage. It's the stage where we loosen up, where we start just listening all over, we start exploring, we start going, maybe I don't know anything. And we just start trying stuff on. It's like a spiritual buffet. We venture out, we go beyond our boundaries, we stretch past our own limits. And it's a time of questions and answers. And it's a time where we usually love answers. Love, love, love answers. We begin to find what fits, and we're generally willing to explore anything. The quicksand here can be metaphysical simplification, just simplifying things. It can be malpractice. Again, going back to the my way, not having a full understanding, but just tapping things, but not really deeply trying it on. It can be a time that we get stuck. We get stuck in the excitement of what we have explored, and we start giving out our power. One form this can take is getting stuck going to or listening to psychics, healers, readers, whatever it is, so much that we are not tuning into our own wisdom anymore. But we can become almost addicted. It could be to a minister, it could be to a teacher, it could be to a guru. But we start like exporting our power. Rather than honoring those spiritual gifts, really seeing them, honoring them, allowing them to inspire us, allowing them to support us in different stages and phases of life, but not giving ourselves away to them. Eric Butterworth, in his book, Celebrate Yourself, goes into this idea. He talks about dependency and getting rid of our crutches. He says, excessive dependency is a common ailment. It may be in the form of leaning on friends, teachers, doctors, or ministers, or it may be a dependency on alcohol, cigarettes, coffee, or drugs. We may have been misled by the belief that we come to life as empty creatures who must find fulfillment in the world, unless something happens within us that reveals our relationship to the divine and all kinds of synthetic means of support. Then we will look to these other places for safe harbors and strong arms. He said, we need to know that he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world, so we can overcome any situation or meet any experience without leaning on people or stimulants. We must work at it. We must grow. Growth is what life is all about. He goes on to say, you can get rid of your crutches, but first you must be willing to change your thinking. He talks about counting on ourselves and taking careful inventory about our behavior. So that stage is marked by the growth point of expanding into our spiritual power, or the point where we could atrophy and become dependent, begin leaning too much. And that can lead to not being accountable for our own actions in our own life. The next stage that I've found is really surrender. I think a spiritual practice without an element of surrender, well, it might be fun to not have to get there, but I think it's rare. Surrender is sometimes marked by dismay, disappointment, confusion, chaos. It sometimes brings us to our knees. It humbles us. It brings us to the idea of, I thought I know stuff. I don't even know if I know anything anymore. I thought I knew these laws and principles. I'm not sure what I know. It begins to soften us, and it invites us again into a beginner's mind, a mind that is truly open. A mind that goes beyond dogma, beyond religion, beyond any of the books, beyond any of the teachers. A mind that is open and a mind that makes space for the mystical. We begin in this stage to realize that it is futile to compare our lives to that of anyone else. And we start to become comfortable with questions that don't have answers. And we begin to really honor the path and the practice of living in the question and allowing that to bring us sweetness. If we get stuck at this stage, we often get stuck because we hit a point where we think we knew everything about the practice, and then we awoke to realize it's not working, it doesn't work, and we throw it all out. And we go, all of this is garbage. That's where we can get off track. When we find that we've practiced for a while and all of a sudden, I'm not demonstrating anymore. I'm not manifesting anything that I think. My life isn't becoming easier. That's when we get stuck. Or we go with the flow of the water and we allow ourselves to fully surrender with a complete beginner's mind. And we enter into the next stage experience, which I think is inner peace. A peace that does not come from circumstances, and a peace that does not come from our surroundings. A peace that comes from gratitude, a peace that comes from living in the moment. And this stage is characterized by a balancing co-creation and our ability to step into our power and to create, with also the ability to be in non-attachment and allowing those things not to be in conflict, but to be in harmony. Allowing ourselves to have the wisdom enough to know that those can harmonize, that we can surrender and trust, and also balance that with being accountable and taking action and co-creating. This is a stage where we have a deeper experience of the principles and the laws and the practice, where we become non-judgmental, non-dogmatic, and we simply become experiential. We step into being in agreement with what is. A bit of non-duality comes up here. And we just realize, like, who am I to even try to judge this or categorize this or figure this out? But I am clearly here to live it. I'm clearly here to unfold it. This is the stage where love replaces fear, where we stop looking at our lives as if there is something wrong, and we start making agreements with what is rather than fighting what is. We stop trying so hard to figure everything out. And instead we begin to experience life. Now again, I think these stages are not things that we necessarily graduate from. They're more like spiral experiences where we can go back and forth. Sig Paulson talks about them like the growth of wisdom that's here to support us. He says, as the feeling of love grows in you, your wisdom grows too. And soon you will be able to do what love does. You will be able to approve of love's immediate instrument of expression, yourself. You will be able to bypass judgment based on appearances and go to the heart or the truth of your nature. You put the stamp of approval on yourself boldly, even audaciously, because your sense of separation and fear is being expelled by the feeling of love, the action of God. You are now wise enough to know that unless you're willing to step out of the atmosphere of disapproval and into the environment of approval, love cannot continue its miracle of transformation. We might say that approval is the opening shot that brings the full power of love to bear in our unfoldment and our growth. It gives you spiritual feet. Do you approve of yourself as the image of God, the light of the world, the self-expression of love? Do you approve of yourself as love at work? This is the stage of inner peace. This is the practice. Namaste.